communication is others-centric. It's not about let me have a soapbox to tell you what's happening in my life.
Yes.
Not that at all. It's inviting the other person into your life so that they could benefit from you. True communication is very unselfish.
Welcome to It's Not About the Money, a podcast in search of grounded fundraising. I'm Heather, and together with my co-host Andy, we look beyond the quick tips and formulas. Join us as we explore the nuance and complexity of ministry fundraising. If you want to thrive in partner development, not just survive it, this is the place for you.
All right, welcome back to the show. There are a lot of reasons for donors to stop giving, but a prime reason is that they feel a lack of communication from their field partner. Like any relationship, communication is critical. So it's easy to see why a donor could feel used or even slighted if they're experiencing the silent treatment. So why don't we communicate more or better? Or is there a chance we are trying to communicate, but the message just isn't being received? How can we take the mystery out of communication? How can we know that what we are producing has the best chance of being read or being viewed?
Those are great questions, Andy, and it is my pleasure to introduce our guest for the day to help us get those answered. Barb Peil received her Master of Arts in Christian Education from Dallas Theological Seminary, and she has worked for 3 decades within the ministry context in education, writing, Christian radio, and in ministries that make a global impact for Christ. She spent 10 years with Insight for Living Ministries, 10 years with Walk in the Word, and she has spent the past 10 years and still works with Through the Bible. In addition to that, she is also an author, which we will provide a link to her book, One-on-One, 100 Days with Jesus. We'll provide that in our show notes. And she's also currently writing for the He Gets Us campaign. Barb has also worked with Pursuant, which is a fundraising agency out of Texas. And in general, Barb just brings a wealth of experience to this conversation.
Real treat.
Yeah.
Thanks for joining us, Barb.
Oh, it's my pleasure.
So let's start from the beginning. Tell us a story. What brought you to this point in your life? How does one get to where you are right now? Did you feel that there was a sense of calling from the beginning?
You know, if there's a metaphor that I would use for where I am today, it would be I have been a leaf on a river. You know, we all think when we're young, we think, oh, I'd like to do this someday, or I'd like to do this. Well, the things that I've gotten to do, I never would have imagined that I would have been invited into. And yet, like a leaf is driven by a river downstream, it's a beautiful picture of letting God lead your life and the adventures the unexpected adventures that you encounter.
Mm-hmm.
That's a really great metaphor. Are there any kind of key events that you feel happened in life that either gave you a real excitement about writing, or that positioned you to write for an audience as opposed to just for yourself?
It's a good question, Heather. The funny word is, you know, the word story is such a touchstone word today. People love the idea of story. And I remember as a little girl, my parents had first come to Christ right before I was born. And so we were in church every time the doors were open. And I have a very vivid memory. One of my very first memories is standing on a pew, belting out the hymn, I love to tell the story.
That's great.
Nice.
You know, if you know that hymn, it's I love to tell the story of Jesus and his love. And that's been a theme of my life, of how do we tell the story of Jesus and his love. You know, when you think about story, I've been on the opposite side of a lot of people telling a story, which I wasn't really tracking with. Like, what am I missing? I don't really get this story. And it does come down to communication. And I think the word that I would put over my life more than a storyteller or more than a writer is I really would like my life to be characterized by communication. And what makes good communication. And that is just the definition of the word means that what I intend to share is what you are hearing. Like they match.
Received. Yeah.
And so if, you think about communication with your friends or with your family or your spouse, and you think they are hearing what I am saying, and that's when true communication happens. Right. And the same thing happens when you go to communicate about some missional work that you're involved in. Is are they hearing what I'm saying?
Right. And
if not, then you've got to figure it out. And you don't even have to overthink it. It's just the same, like, how come my wife or my husband doesn't understand me? I'm saying this, and they're hearing something different than that. And so the same thing follows when you talk about your communication style, your public communication style. Is it matching?
Yeah, so let's start broad then. Why do you think consistent communication from the field is so difficult? That's part A. Part B, why do you think it's so important to donors?
Well, I just don't think it's important. I think it's essential.
Yeah.
It's the thing that keeps the relationship going. And again, I wouldn't overthink it. Think about the things that break down your connection with the people that you care about most. Is it time between you? Is it distance between you? You talk with your coworker perhaps more than you talk with your grandparent.
Sure.
Because that's another generation, and it probably is distance, and it's probably time, and all those things break down. But then also, think about the physical things that keep you apart, but then also think about misunderstanding. We've all got a dialogue going on in our head that characterizes our relationship.
Right.
And so, there's a lot of room there for misunderstanding. Or sometimes it's a lack of focus. I'm not intentionally making time to communicate. You both have wonderful marriages. If you didn't take time to be with your spouse and say, okay, this time is for you, I'm focused on you right now, I want to hear from you, then, you have a lot of gaps and a lot of opportunities for misunderstanding. And then I would add to that also a lack of gratitude. Like when I'm not grateful for the relationship with somebody, my communication breaks down.
Yeah, maybe there's a sense of entitlement. We've talked about entitlement before. Like, Lord, I'm doing this, this, and this, therefore I deserve these kinds of funding or whatever. Yeah.
Or I shouldn't have to work so hard.
That is, I am so all over that. That's like a cancer of communication right there.
Yeah.
That is terminal. Like you better correct that, or else that is terminal. There is no way, because communication, I think you bring up a good point, Andy. The communication is others centric. It's not about let me have a soapbox to tell you what's happening in my life.
Yes.
Not that at all. It's inviting the other person into your life so that they could benefit from you. True communication is very unselfish.
Love that.
Even though you might be wanting to share something from your heart to them, it's for their benefit.
Yes.
I didn't even think about this before, but you're bringing a great point. Communication has to be others centric.
Yeah.
It can't be about what I'm going to communicate this with you because I want to benefit from you somehow, whether it's your prayer support or your financial support or your number on a mailing list or whatever. Right. But oh my goodness.
Yeah. It feels like we trace.
As soon as you start being entitled, you just introduced a cancer into your.
It feels like we trace so many obstacles and so many hurdles back to the misplaced focus. And we keep trying to remind people it's not about you. This isn't, you're not going over to this country because of what it's going to do for you and your career and your whatever your prospects, and you have to shift your focus.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And you know what? It's a hard thing because, at our hearts, we are selfish. We do think of ourselves. And so if you're feeling little tinges of guilt, it's okay.
Yeah.
Take it to Jesus and get rid of it. But it's understandable, especially if you're giving up things and you think that you're entitled to something else. It's understandable.
Yeah.
But all you have to do is think of Jesus.
Yeah.
Who left heaven.
Yeah.
For you. It's not even comparable. And the things that we are gaining from the sacrifice are not to be compared. And my goodness, don't give up the treasure that you're allotting yourself in heaven for some self-entitlement.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, man, I really love that. I love that it emphasizes that this is a partnership. It is not just about getting the funding. It is about leaning into this partnership God has created for His good purposes, for mutual benefit, giving of yourself, not communicating with an agenda, at least not your agenda, right? Communicating with God's agenda.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
Here's a practical way to remember that. Think about how you name your body of supporters. What do you call them?
Yeah.
If you call them donors or supporters, that's saying right there that it's all about me.
Yeah.
But if you call them partners, if you call them your ministry family, if you call them your team, then there's an inclusion.
Yeah.
Then there's a sense that we have a shared vision of how we see God working in our relationship. And I might be the one to be going, but they're the ones that have this same shared vision of what we want to accomplish there.
Yeah. Words
I would
important.
say, yeah, words are really important because not only that, but they shape what you think about them, and it also shapes how they see themselves. Am I one of your donors? Well, maybe I am and maybe I'm not, but if I see myself as on your team, or if I see myself as your partner in ministry or your partner in impact, or however you want to phrase it, if there's an inclusion, then you've already gotten over one huge hurdle.
Right.
I would say ask yourselves how they would answer in a sentence or two why they support you, and whether that means they pray for you or if they financially support you. Would they be able to be equipped to summarize the missional value of what you're doing? If somebody says, tell me something that you're excited about, and they say, oh, well, I'm a part of a team that's going to Mongolia and taking God's word and God's love to Mongolia. Really? How? Oh, this team that I'm on begins in the classroom, and whatever.
Yeah.
So can they
Identify
verbalize in a sentence or two what you're doing together?
Yeah.
Man, that's great. So our next question was, what are some of the common reasons that field communications may fall flat? And what I hear you saying is that one of the core kind of missteps from the very beginning is just kind of the way you view this team that the Lord has brought around you, and then the way you view yourself in relation to that. I also heard you articulate that a common reason communication may fall flat is because you're communicating on behalf of your own considerations and not necessarily trying to speak to informing or encouraging those on the receiving end. So I guess in addition to those elements that you've already brought forth, what are some other common reasons that those communications may fall flat?
Fizzle.
Well, generally, I would picture a bullseye with three circles. And in those three circles, I would put on the outer circle, I would put what's happening, what's going on, what's my day like, what's my what. So the answer of what And then the inner circle, the middle ring would be how. And then the center bullseye would be why.
Mm.
Yeah.
I would say a lot of communication happens in that outer circle, what.
Yeah.
And, to be honest, that's not very compelling.
Amen.
It's just not. I did this, I did that, I did this. And how I did it, oh, well, I went here, and then I went here, and then I went there. But the real magic happens in the center when I say why.
Yeah.
Why am I here? Why is this hard? Why am I sensing God at work? How am I sensing God at work? And why is this important? Mm-hmm. And so I would begin to ask the questions, why? And again, why takes a little bit of foundation. So you're building on why.
Sure.
But why will get you to what's important so much faster.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So kind of like you're beginning with the end in mind. You want your partners to be excited about what God is doing. You want your partners to be thrilled at supporting you in it on the ground, but they have a sense of ownership over what you're doing. Mm. So if that's your goal, how can you begin to communicate with them?
So how does
that goal? How
does that look practically? If I'm sitting down to write, let's say a newsletter, an update, am I? So I'm avoiding talking about just a litany of what I did over the past couple of months. Is it a matter of just choosing a story that emphasizes the why?
I'm so glad you asked that because, and I didn't know how it was going to come up, but I have a list of fundraising fails.
Okay.
So let me start with that because then that'll lay the foundation for what you can do.
Gotcha.
Here's what you shouldn't do. Your communication, and I'll start with a newsletter, but it could also include emails. It can also include posts. So fundraising fails. My first one is it's not all about me.
Yep.
It's not all about me. It's about the vision that you share with your partner about why you're there. So every time you write, let's say a newsletter, make sure that is answered somehow. Maybe it's in the start as you pray for me this week, or as you bring this before the Father this week, or let's remember what we're about. So it comes like, even if you have to overtly state it every time, that's not overkill.
Yeah.
Not overkill. I have down some catchy things like it's fundraising fails. Don't be a banker. It's not all about the money.
Yeah.
We agree.
Cluster bombs.
You're here.
Yep. Cluster bombs. Maybe you haven't communicated in a long time, and then you send out like 3 cluster bombs of communication within a month. I don't know why people aren't responding.
Yeah.
Here I am. I'm communicating.
Yeah.
You also don't want to write the Christmas letter every month or every time.
Mm.
Like the Christmas letter of let's recap on things that I did.
Right.
Yeah. Like,
here's what I did on March 15th.
Also, yeah. You don't want to write the novel either. Like you want your people to be able to sit down and in 10 minutes get what you're talking about. There's a phrase in writing that said, if I had more time, I would have written less.
Yes.
And so, write what you can and then give it a rest and then go back and cut it in half.
Yes.
Don't write the itinerary either. We did this, and then we did this, and then we did this.
Here's the timeline.
Yeah. Don't write a diary either. A diary would be me processing stuff. You're just bound to go into TMI really fast.
Yeah.
Don't write the gory details. That newsletter is not the place to write the gory details or to make fun of the culture.
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
Look at this disgusting thing that I had to eat.
Right.
That's not funny, and it's not honoring.
That's a great point. Yeah.
And or don't be the judge. Like you're all of a sudden judging the other culture. That's no good.
Right.
So then I have, okay, so how do we do it better?
Yes.
How do we do it better?
All right.
Tell us, Barb.
Get your pencils out, listeners.
I would say do it first. Do this communication work. And it is work. It's not natural.
Right.
And it doesn't come easily. I just want to say that as a veteran communicator, that I also sit down to a blank screen and think, what am I going to write about now?
Yeah. But it's a learned skill.
I would say it is a learned skill. I am a lifelong learner on how to write well. I'm taking an online class right now.
Awesome.
Because it's like a slinky. You know, a slinky, if you stretch it out, you might hit some of the same things over and over and over again, but you're getting deeper or higher, depending on which way you want to look at it.
Okay.
And so I would say do it for yourself first. Like before you even try to communicate with your partner, with your team, I would say you have to be writing things down for yourself. Capture what's happening. I'm a lifelong journaler, but my journal isn't every day. I'm not legalistic about my journaling, but I do have to be disciplined about it. I'm not legalistic, but I am disciplined. There's a difference.
Yeah.
So I do what I call a 5-sentence journal. In that every night I try to pick one thing from today. Our conversation now will be my topic tonight when I go to write 5 lines about something important from today. And I'll talk about what does it take to communicate well. And I'll write 5 lines about it in my journal.
Yeah.
5 years from now, you won't remember what was important about this season that you're in. But if you write it down, you will. I dare say that you'll forget the faithfulness of God if you don't write it down. And so make this part of your own curriculum to discipline yourself to write things down.
That's good.
So that would be number one. I would also say ask questions all the time as you write things down. Things like, what's going on and why does that matter? What's going on here and why does that matter? You know, like let's say something happened in an interaction that you had with somebody today. Why was that important? Think about your partner's questions.
Yeah.
What have they asked you about? I would keep a page in your journal of just questions that people have asked you. And then go when you're facing a blank page, just go look at those questions and see if anything is jogged.
You say journal, Barb, but people could walk around with just their cell phone and a notebook app. And as they have ideas that come to them, they can just pop that open and have different categories and organize things that way.
Any mechanism that works for you. I did a year where I captured a picture every day of what I thought was important.
Yeah.
I was with a group of teachers in another country where the teacher caught 10 seconds of video every day. And then they put it together in a movie of the things that they thought were important about every day.
Interesting.
And that was really creative and really, really fun.
Insightful.
And it ended up only being like 3 or 4 seconds from every day.
Okay.
But you put that together and, you have, a 10-minute video that captures the whole school year.
Wow. That takes a lot of discipline.
Although
it did.
There is an app called, I think, 1 Second Every Day that will kind of curate that for you. Yeah.
Of course there is.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. In fact, I think that's what they use.
Oh, cool.
Okay.
I think they use 1 second. Because you capture more than 1 second, but you can edit it down. Before we go any further, I say, you want to stay balanced so that you're hopeful and you're visionary and you're also vulnerable and hardworking. And, you are a composite of all of that at any given moment. And so reflecting that to your team, your partners is good.
Yeah.
Okay. So on a practical note, very practical note, I build a structure. I do a newsletter for Through the Bible every month.
Okay.
And I have 12 pages that I need to fill every month. And so I headline every page and it stays consistent month to month.
Wow.
We have a Bible article, Bible application article. We have a notes from the field. We have a why should I study this certain book? We have a personal focus. And so I would say, think about what categories you could structure and then say, okay, I need something for every category. What am I going to do with from the classroom or overheard or God notes or something, along that line? You get what I mean?
Yeah.
Like you're something missional or something cultural or frequently asked questions or a picture with an extended caption or something specific to pray about or something related to your gratitude for them. And then every month you start plugging in your stories for each of those categories. It really makes a big difference.
Simplifies it.
Yeah. And what you'll find is that your brain will start to look for those things.
It provides a continuity. I remember when I was on the field, there was a woman that sold potatoes, like these amazing, spicy fried potatoes.
Oh, man.
And it was a standard part of my correspondence with people to talk about my chats with the potato lady or the, Yeah. They looked forward to that.
People will begin to pray for that lady.
Yes.
They'll pray for the students that you reference in your stories. They'll ask you about them. Like you're giving tangible things for your partners to feel connected. If they feel connected, they're going to stay.
That's true.
If they feel connected.
Yeah.
And so I have 6 B's here. 6, be smart. What you're writing about, be smart. Don't dummy it down. And people will say, put the cookies on the bottom shelf. Well, yes, in the way that you present it, but no, in what you say. You can be smart.
So how does that work? I mean, do you present it with simple words, but you have big ideas? Is that what you mean by that?
Yeah, exactly, Andy.
Okay.
That means that you have the responsibility to communicate it well so that your partner hears what's important behind it. So be smart, be warm. Like you are making this decision out of love. You love people that you're serving.
Yeah.
You love your partner. Yeah. You love the Lord. Yeah. Let that warmth be seen.
Saturate.
And be real too. If you're having a hard month, there's a space in that newsletter to say, I'm having a hard month.
Yeah.
Don't gloss over it, but then also don't camp on it.
Right. Don't give the gory details like you said earlier.
Right. But be real.
Yeah. Be authentic.
Just say, we're having a hard time adjusting to some cultural things this month. Please remember us.
Yeah.
That's all that needs to be said. Be connected would be my next thing. Like what you're communicating has to feel connected to your partner. Like you're not just saying it for the sake of saying it. You're saying it to get somewhere. Like, where are you going with this story? Too often times I remember reading a lot of newsletters where they would talk about, this was something that came up in the classroom, and that's where they left it. They didn't say,
so what?
So what? Why did you tell me this?
Yeah.
Just like, you're meeting somebody for dinner and I'm I'm going to tell you about my day, and I tell you something and they're like, okay.
Yeah.
And then I would say my last B is be grateful. Be grateful for the opportunity that you're having. Be grateful for them, for their partnership with you. Be grateful to God for these insights that you're gaining that you wouldn't have gained any other time. I think it goes without saying that your levels of communication should match the level of intimacy that you have with your folks. So you're not going to overshare with a general audience, but you also don't want to be shallow with your closest audience.
Yeah.
Right.
And so there might be some communications that are segmented. Like you might have a prayer team of 10 people and they know that they're one of 10. And so by golly,
Sure.
they better be praying.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And so you're going to talk to them a little differently than you would your general audience.
Yeah. That's good.
A case in point might be, you mentioned in your newsletter that this has been a hard month with some cultural struggles. Well, in your email to your prayer team that month, you're going to elaborate on that.
Yeah.
So I think, where do you get your ideas from? I think in short, you pay attention. You observe, you listen, you pray about things, you discipline yourself to write it down, and you practice the art. And it is an art and a discipline of paying attention. Yeah. I wrote down here in my notes that when I'm working on a project, as a writer, I ask God to put in front of me what I need to consider, what I need to research, what do I need to include. And that's why I write it down, because I've lost so many precious things that I haven't written it down. So writing it down and paying attention is a discipline. It might be as simple as looking twice at somebody and things that you might have just ignored, but now you're paying attention to it. To be a good communicator is a different way of life.
Is an extra layer of intentionality.
Yeah.
I'll say that again. To be a good communicator is a different way of life.
Yeah.
It's full of so much treasure if you're willing to pay attention to it. I think it's a spiritual discipline where I give God access to me, and I say, I am paying attention. Just like there's a psalm, and I can't think of the reference, where it says, enlarge my heart and I will run to obey. If you show me something, I will write it down and I will use it.
You need a different set of antenna.
It's true, you do. Yeah. And I find if I'm struggling with writing something, I review my notes like crazy before I go to bed. And I pray about it, and then I go to sleep. And in the morning, 9 times out of 10, I will have the answer. And so there's something that goes on in our sleep where the Lord talks to us. And I won't get weird about it. I'll just say that the dreaming mind is active.
Interesting. There's a little hack for you.
It is. And it works. And that's the crazy thing, is it works. Like, rather than stay up and try to muscle through writing something, I will outline it. I will pray about it. I will brainstorm. I will do all of the hard work that you're supposed to do. And then I will just go to bed and say, Lord, I trust you that you'll give me the answer in the morning. So another little hack is make your first line of anything that you write, make it really poignant and short. Like Chuck Swindoll, I worked with Chuck for many years, and every first sentence of his sermons are 14 words or less.
Oh, nice. Interesting.
You can test it. Go read any of his books. The first line of every chapter of any chapter, any sermon is 14 lines or less.
And that just speaks to, we need a good hook.
And he works hard on that 14-word line.
Yeah. Interesting.
So in my devotional one-on-one with Jesus, I tried that as a personal writing challenge.
Ooh,
every sentence, every first sentence has to be 14 words or less.
Interesting.
It has to be interesting. That first line has to be interesting.
Yes. I'll be interested to see as I read books how many other people have kind of adopted something like that.
Yeah, it might not be exactly the same, but it has some kind of pattern to it.
Yeah, right.
So, man, I'm just kind of flooded with excitement over these very practical tips you've given, as well as kind of the overarching principles to think about when communicating with people. And I guess, you said that to be a good communicator is kind of a different way of living. And I think that makes a lot of sense, especially as we are thinking about really being more mindful of what's happening around you, being disciplined to record that, not just sitting down to produce some kind of communication, but really curating a communication with a variety of things in mind. But I guess there's part of me that's thinking, our listener might be thinking, that makes sense, and I'm kind of overwhelmed. So what are some initial steps to just help me tell a better story as I'm working on developing this kind of discipline of being more mindful?
I'd say begin. Those are great questions, Heather. I appreciate that. I'd say begin with what do you want to communicate, and it doesn't get into the communication. That's just your a headline to keep your mind sharp on what is it that you want to communicate. I want to communicate that sacrificing this is worth this.
Think of a theme. Is that what you would call it?
Yeah, pick a theme. Yeah, pick that, and everything has to relate back to that theme somehow. And then when you're in the editing role, you can cut whatever doesn't fit. I'm a ruthless editor of my work, but I don't throw it away. I always keep a little dump file at the bottom of the document, and whatever I cut, I put down there. And it makes it easier to cut. Yeah. Because I'm not throwing it away. It's just not working there.
You're not saying goodbye.
Could work somewhere else.
Yeah, you're just saying see you later.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Exactly. Because we get attached to an idea or a story or a point where it may not relate. It might be a rabbit trail. But that rabbit trail will be useful for something else.
So you've given us some great tips. If you're evaluating things that have happened over the past month, and if you're trying to write a newsletter, for example, what lens do you use? Do you equip to ask yourself, is this actually a good story to tell?
What does it say about Jesus? What does it say about the mission? I would use that. I would go back to the begin with the end in mind. What you are trying to do is say, thank you for supporting me in this mission that we're on together.
Yeah.
And so use that as your evaluation of whether it stays or goes.
Yeah.
How does it further the mission?
Yeah.
Them being attached to the mission.
Yeah. And I should say we're kind of picking on a newsletter as a format right now, but there are many formats to communicate. There are many means through which to communicate. So you're going to spend more time and more intent on crafting a beautiful newsletter, whereas you might be more personal and immediate with social media.
Yeah, actually, I would love to hear, what do you think is the tension you hold when working on something that you are going to put on a platform like that that's, still needs to be curated, but maybe isn't as themed or maybe has a different value behind the point of communication?
I would say, again, I would build a structure to say, is this meant to be fun? Is this meant to be poignant? Is this meant to be interesting? And say, does it fit in any of those buckets? Yeah, I think it does. Okay, post it then.
Yeah. What are my values? Establish what are my values?
And boundaries in a way.
Yeah, that's good.
So, okay, what if you've been on the field for, years and years and years, and you just feel like you've run out of things to say, which I guess kind of hearkening back to earlier points of this chat, God is always doing something, so just pay attention to what he's doing. But let's just say that people feel stuck. How would you counsel them?
Yes. Well, I just learned something, and that this is 1 week old. I was working on a campaign that is trying to reach the skeptic with the good news of Jesus. And I'm struggling. I'm sitting there saying, what do I talk about that I haven't talked about already? And I'm dinking around, looking through my notes, and I came across a conversation that I had with somebody, and I wrote it down about a book called Generations. And the book is by Neil Howe, and it's on Amazon.
Okay.
And it's a pretty secular, pretty academic read. But here it is in a nutshell. In a nutshell, the premise of this book is generations repeat themselves every 4 years.
Oh.
And they are drawing out evidence of this cultural pattern for hundreds of years.
Interesting.
And every generation has a different question. Well, specifically, when it comes to spiritual things, every generation sees it through a different lens. And so if I was on the field struggling with what to write about, I would begin by thinking, okay, my audience is made up of, let's say, 3 generations. And in this book, they specifically talk about the names that we are familiar with. Number 1 are boomers, and they are people born from 1943 to 1960. And their question that they want answered in spiritual realms all the time is, what is true? And they seek absolute truth, which is why people born in that generation were really strong on C.S. Lewis, who was an apologetic. You can think of probably any number of other apologetic folks. Lee Strobel, Josh McDowell,
R.C. Sproul,
and R.C. Sproul. If you tell me what is absolutely true, I will bend my whole life around that. If it's true, then it's worth believing. And you have people reading your newsletter in that audience. Okay,
for sure.
And then you have people that were born between 1961 and 1981. And we are the Xers.
Yes.
Generation Xers. And they ask not what is true, but they ask what is real. And does it work for me? It's very relativistic. We're very sensitive to hypocrisy. Even the best argument sometimes smells false. We won't listen. Xers don't even want to argue with something they don't trust. Okay? So think about the people in your audience that are dealing with what is real. Then you have people that were born between 1982 and 2002, and they're the millennials. And they want to get something good done. Community in itself is an end. They're used to being on teams. They're used to working it out. And if the gospel can't speak to what's going on in the world, then they don't want it. And their question is, what is good? What's good for me? What's good for the group? What's good for the earth? What's good for our country? They want to know what's good. And so while our grandparents and parents might care about what's true, what the Xers think about what is relative to me, does it work for me? The millennials will say what is good. And then the last group that's born after 2003, what is beautiful? Or a corollary, they might ask what is just. And they will start to repeat our parents' generation born before 1942.
So the next group will say, is it true?
Yep. Yep. And then, so this author characterized every generation he called them the boomers, he called the hero generation. Because oftentimes there's been a huge calamity that has prompted, and it's repeating through hundreds of years of history. It's so crazy that group rises up after a calamity and they become a hero generation.
Interesting.
And then the Xers, the children of those heroes, will become nomads. And then the millennialists are essentially narcissists. And then the
Heather's a millennial.
Well, they're only thinking of their community, themselves.
Okay.
And then the generation X or Y, whichever, are artists. They're also called the silent generation.
Oh, interesting.
So I would say to the person who is struggling with what does my audience need to hear, I'd run it through this grid.
Yeah.
To say, okay, what's true? What here is evidence of God at work, and what is true about that? Or what is real, as in relative to it works. It works in real life. This is happening. And or what is good about this? What is the gospel speaking to? And then finally, what is beautiful? And I had big tears in my eyes as I was reading this, and I thought, oh my goodness, it's Philippians 4:8. Whatever things are good, whatever things are true, whatever things are beautiful, think on these things.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, cool. I mean, the gospel embodies all of those. There's no tension with the gospel.
Right.
Yeah.
Which is why God is like the ultimate communicator.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Because the Bible doesn't go through these cycles. People see different things in the Bible for these cycles. The lenses.
Yeah.
Yeah, totally. That is really cool. Okay, so that actually prompts another question, because I can imagine that there are so many ways to speak so profoundly into each of these, but what would you say for a person working in a creative access country that has to be not unclear in their terminology, but has to
be creative?
Be
creative. What advice would you have for them?
Maybe you pick up on these 4 words. These 4 words are very moral.
That's true.
What's true, what's real, what's good, and what's beautiful.
Yeah. And just.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's good.
And so you talk about, at another point, you've explained to your audience that you're not going to be able to spell some things out, but let me tell you about things that are true and real and good and beautiful. And then I will follow up with you with stories from this. And all you have to say at the front is, let me tell you a beautiful story. Or let me tell you how this has become real to me. Or let me tell you something good. Or let me tell you something true about it. And, there's no offense there.
That's true.
Right. Yeah. Well, Barb, thank you so much. And as we kind of wrap up, just a couple more questions.
Sure.
Getting really practical here. Do you think it makes sense to sort of develop calendar for your communication, or does that seem to like we're forcing it too much? Does it stifle our creativity, or should we just write when we have something interesting to say?
Think about your audience. I was going to use the example of like a television series. You know that every Thursday night you're going to watch such and such on TV. But now the new frame is, no, you're going to binge watch it on the weekend. So my metaphor kind of fell apart there.
Yeah.
But I would say you cannot let your creativity guide your communication. That would be silly. That's like, put that over your marriage. Would that work?
Sure.
No.
Yeah.
It wouldn't work to say, whenever I feel like it, I'm going to tell her that I love her.
Right.
No, you have to be intentional about okay,
Date
I'm
night.
going to show her this way and this way and this way, and I'm going to do it consistently. So I am all about building a structure, and disciplining yourself to that structure. You're never going to feel like writing. Can I tell you that?
Says the writer. Yeah.
As a writer,
Yeah.
you can't wait until you feel like writing.
Yeah.
Because you never will.
Right.
You'll have this guilt cloud over you all the time. And so I would say, give yourself a schedule that you can maintain. And I'm not saying it's every month, but I'm saying it's frequent. Because they're expecting it. Put the relationship, a normal relationship, how would you go about it? You don't go 6 months without saying hi to a friend and then expect them to pay for dinner.
Right. Yeah.
Right.
No, you keep that relationship alive.
Yeah.
It might be casual 2 or 3 times, and then all of a sudden something really meaningful.
Yeah, because going back to something you said earlier in the conversation that I believe is very true is that connection is so key. That feeling connected to the work is so key.
Yeah.
What I heard you say is don't wait for inspiration.
No.
Yeah.
It comes when you're, I call it BIC days, button chair. Put your butt in the chair and write it.
Yeah.
And
you make it easier for yourself if you practice that discipline of journaling and taking good notes. Then it's
structure.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, because if you've created a structure or a plan, if you've kind of thought through the categories or maybe the themes that you want to explore on an ongoing basis, if you've put the work into doing that, then you're going to start noticing those things. Then you're going to have time that you've set aside to sit down and try to curate that. So yeah, it's kind of like a discipline that builds on itself in a really good way.
In a good way, yeah. And you know what? Those are the newsletters that I want to read.
Yeah.
If there's that kind of thought put into it, I can't wait to open the envelope to read about those. Sometimes I don't even get into my front door. I will see a newsletter that's come, and I will sit on my porch because I couldn't wait to read it. Other newsletters, they've kind of sat in the mail tray because I know what's in it, and it's not good.
Yeah.
Care about them, so I'm not going to throw it out.
Right. But that's the difference between paper and an email too. It's easy to forget about an email that you've scrolled past. Harder to forget a paper letter. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I like the analogy that you brought up about comparing your donor, your partner relationship to like a marriage relationship, and just like you need to put the intentionality, the forethought into it. And it makes me think of just like there are different love languages for different people. You have a different love language for those generations as well.
Yeah, exactly.
So
I didn't even think about that, Andy. You're right. Yeah. You're absolutely right.
That's a freebie.
Yeah, it is because I was just talking with somebody the other day, and their conclusion was, well, if you tell me that that's true, then I'm all over it. And I thought, yep, you're over 60. In my head, I'm thinking, okay, that fits that category because that person is over 60.
Yeah.
So, but it's not necessary. Now, truth doesn't mean that something beautiful can't be true.
Sure. They're not exclusive.
It just means the angle that you're approaching it.
Right.
Yeah.
Because, of course, God's word is true all the way. But some of it is very beautiful.
And maybe that's where a gifted communicator can take the same story and bring out the different facets.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
I didn't even think of that. That's exactly right. Yep.
Yeah. So I'm curious, Barb, no matter what generation people are from, I'm wondering if you would apply these same, I guess we'll call them love languages. If you would apply these same languages to the way that you communicate need, or maybe even before that question, I would ask, how often do you feel that people should expressly ask for funds in a written communication? Is that appropriate?
Your question is very pertinent to me in my work with Through the Bible, because we make a point of not asking. And so my challenge is to say, how do I put in front of people the fact that we are listener supported without asking?
Yeah.
Without
doing a pledge drive.
It's like we don't do any of that. None of it.
Wow.
And we have surpluses upon surplus. So I would say this is where your partnership talk has to become real. And you talk with your donor about, you are in partnership with me in seeing lives changed. Thank you. And I would couch it always with gratitude. I would ask every single time, but I would couch it differently. I would put it in terms of gratitude.
So it's not a direct ask.
This is evidence of your partnership, of how God is using your partnership in Asia. And all of a sudden now they're thinking, what do you mean my partnership? Oh, because I give. Thank you for investing your life and your treasure in something that's going to outlive all of us. So you're catching it in gratitude language and in partnership language. And then whenever you have a need, I would say don't save it for December and June. Don't save your asks for those days because that's contrived. That's man-made.
Right. Okay.
When you have a need, you let them know. Because think of it. Think about, again, your partnership with your friends. I needed a ride to the airport the other day, and something happened and my plans fell through. And so I have a friend who lives nearby, and I said, I hate to bother you, but I really need a ride to the airport. Can you take me? Absolutely. Yeah. When do you need to leave? Now? Sure. Let's go.
Yeah.
And she was pleased to do it, and I was grateful for the help. And so you let people know when you have a need.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I just want to speak to what you were saying just prior to that in just, couching it in gratitude. I think that this is probably clear, but I will make it abundantly clear that it will never work if you are operating in a pretense of gratitude. So when you say couch it in gratitude, you're not at all saying you need to find a way to make it seem grateful. You're saying from your heart, you need from your heart to be operating in gratitude. And I think sometimes that can be hard. Sometimes you can feel under the pressure. Go ahead.
That if you're not, then you are walking in a desert.
Yeah.
So you need time with the Lord and ask him to grow that in you. Whatever is working as a barrier between you, because here's the curriculum that the Lord has you on, that you're dependent upon other people to do the work that you feel called to, that you might love even. But you have been put in this curriculum. The Lord has you in it. And maybe it's that one thing that you take with you to the rest of your life, that you cultivate gratitude for others. Maybe that's all you take from this season, and it would be worth it. If you are not operating with a spirit of gratitude, let that be between you and the Lord, and get out of the desert.
It circles back to that sense of entitlement.
Yeah, it does.
How poisonous that can be.
That's nothing but a desert too.
Yeah. And we've shared that we believe that the Lord has more going on in this season than just an exchange of funds, right? It is about formation and growth and dependence and beauty.
And community. And factoring communication.
Yeah.
You take those four things and you can repeat them over and over again. I love the quote from John Piper that says, at this moment, the Lord is doing 10,000 things, of which you know 3.
Yeah.
Yeah. True.
And that's living by faith. That's what it means to live by faith, that I believe that God is doing 10,000 things. And I know of 3 of them.
Right. So there might be some listeners, last question for you, Barb. There might be some listeners who feel like, well, that's great. Like, you guys are great. You're a good writer. You spent so much time doing this, but I'm not a good writer, or I'm not a good communicator. That's a skill I haven't learned. What are some small baby steps, some action steps that anybody can take now to start making themselves a better communicator?
I like what Jill Briscoe says. She goes, write badly until you can write goodly.
Awesome.
All it is it's practice.
Yeah.
It's discipline of doing it. If you're not good at it, then you probably don't enjoy it.
Mm-hmm.
And so then you probably don't do it.
Mm-hmm.
And so I would say a baby step would be, maybe it's like my 5-liner.
Good.
Like just write 3 lines every day.
Yeah.
And nobody's looking over your shoulder, so they could, they don't have to sound good.
Right.
But just write 3 lines every day.
Develop the habit.
Yeah. And then sometimes if I don't have anything to say, I'll find a quote that I liked in a book that I'm reading, and I copy that quote into the journal.
Yeah.
Just because the act of writing makes me a better writer.
Mm.
The other thing that is really important is to say what you write. Oh, this is so important. What you write is not your identity. It's a project. Like I love my book that I wrote only because it's my first book and it's like my baby and I love that book, but it's not me. It's a favorite project.
Yeah. Right.
And so sometimes people can't ship things, like they can't get it written. They can't get it sent. It sits in their box or their journal or whatever because they think that it's their identity. It's who I am. And if people don't like it, then they're rejecting me.
Right. Right.
And the truth is, it's a project.
Yeah.
If they reject it, they might just not have the time, or they just might not be in a mental space to read it.
Right.
It's not you they're rejecting.
Right.
Yeah. And I also think it's worth saying, obviously we think communication is important. We've devoted an episode, probably several over the course of the podcast to this topic. But it is also important to say, in kind of going back to what you said about just start writing. It doesn't have to be great, like write bad until you write good. The funding, the Lord's work is not going to, it's not like the Lord is going to call you to this and then, have you partner with people and then it all comes down to your writing. Your writing and your communication has to be rock solid, right? You should strive to be a good communicator because it's loving people, because there's just so much good and beauty that comes through that communication, but it's not, but you're not under the weight of you better be a good communicator or he's done with you, So it's a worthy pursuit.
One of my favorite authors, I love this author, and I'm not going to tell you who it is because it's a bad story. I love this author. I bought everything that she wrote, and then I even went to go see her when she was speaking at a local church. Okay. And I waited in a long line, and when I got up to have her sign my book, she was really rude.
Oh.
And my heart just sank.
Yeah.
And I haven't read anything from her since.
Yeah.
So it is still you that they are supporting.
Yeah.
And not what you tell them in your newsletter.
Yeah.
And so, but they don't know that until you communicate with them.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, man. Well, okay. I don't think Andy intended to mislead you, but we do actually have one more question, and it's our standard question. Okay, so this is our final question before we sign off, but we do ask everyone. So, Barb, you have $10,000 that you have to give away today. You have 5 seconds to decide who or what do you give it to?
Where God is at work. If God is at work there, then I will put everything I've got behind it. But if I can't see where God is working, then I'm not going to put my money there.
I'm curious, what are some of the ways that you see God at work? Or what are some of the avenues by which you have insight into that?
Tangibly, if I see somebody respond to the gospel.
Sure.
If I see circumstances line up so that God's agenda can go forward. If I know my Bible enough to see it being lived out somehow, whether that's in a servant role, somebody serving, or somebody, I might not see it, but I know God's word talks about it enough and I see it in action. If I see love being shown. So I would look for evidence of God at work, and I would put all $10,000 behind it.
Cool. I love how your response really goes back to what you were encouraging people towards, just in being very mindful of what's going on around them, being watchful, being intentional with that. Very cool.
Great.
Thank you for distilling what I know is years and years and years of experience to give some practical tools.
Right.
Yeah. Thank you, Barb. We are confident that this will be helpful, and we are so grateful for your time.
Well, I pray now that God will bless these efforts. God will bless you guys for being conduits, and that He will bless our anybody that is standing for Him and wanting His word and His life to be shared with others who have no other way to receive it. I pray that these words would bless them.
Amen.
May it be so.
It's Not About the Money is presented by Provisio Fundraising Solutions. Provisio equips support-based workers with flexible training, practical resources, and one-on-one coaching. Find out more at provisiofundraising.com.